Hey guys! Today we're going to take a closer look at the time-lapse video of drawing a portrait, and I'm going to give you some tips and advice on how to draw a realistic portrait. So to start off, you're going to need to pick a good reference photo. I have two options here, either Rihanna or Matt Bomer. And this specific photo of Matt isn't great because his face is lit up from the left and the right, so the sides of his face are much lighter than the middle. At first this looks like a great photo, but because of the lighting, it really wouldn't be a great choice. The shadows and everything would kind of look strange as a portrait drawing. But this photo of Rihanna is lit. The lighting is coming more from the top and going down straight into the middle of her face. So the sides of her face are rounded off with shadows and it looks really smooth and nice. This photo has great lighting, it has great contrast, you can see all the details. Overall, it will be a great photo for drawing a portrait. For my supplies, I will be using mixed media white paper, the thick kind that doesn't bend like normal paper, plus some smudgers to blend out and smoothen the shading. Also, my graphite pencils range from 8B, which is the darkest, all the way down to HB, which is in the middle, and 10H, which is the lightest. This green pencil is also extremely dark, almost pitch black, so it's great to use this for all of the darkest parts of the portrait to really bump up the contrast. I also have an eraser and pencil sharpener, and that should be all we need. In order to get all of the proportions to be 100% accurate, we're going to be tracing the outlines of her features from the portrait onto the piece of paper we're drawing on. The best way to do this is definitely with a light box, but I'm traveling and don't have one available right now. So the next best thing is to use a window. And first we're going to place the reference photo up on the window, and then the mixed media white paper on top of that. So use stickers or tape to hold the papers in position, and just remember to have the white paper you're drawing on top of the reference photo. That way you can trace the details. I'm using my lightest pencil, 10H, to go over the outlines of all the important details, making light strokes to outline the obvious shapes of her face, like her lips, nose, and eyes, but also making some light marks where I can see that the shading on her face changes. For example, her eyes have some obvious creases and lines, like where her pupil is, but I also want to get the details of the shadows around her eyes too. Also on her nose, there's the circular shaped highlight at the point of her nose, plus shadows where it curves and rounds off. All of these details are crucial for getting your portrait to look just like the reference. The more detailed your stencil is now, the better your portrait will look in the end. In general, I like to start by working from the bottom up to the top and finishing areas as I go. Here I'm starting by blocking in the lightest, darkest, and middle tones in the neck. Once these shapes in the neck are blocked in, I use a smudger tool to blend everything together. Watch out when you use the smudgers, usually less is more. Otherwise you can end up blending the lights and the darks too much, so everything looks flat like one shade of gray. Cleaning your smudger tool before you use it each time will also help with this, because graphite builds up on the smudgers, which can darken up the areas that you wanted to keep light. So just wipe the smudger on a separate clean piece of paper before using it on light areas at least. Now going up into the face. I like to start by building up the darkest parts of the face first. I usually start by shading in areas a little bit lighter than they should be in the end. This way you can really build up the layers of the portrait and enhance the depth. Also, it's really easy to make areas darker, but it's pretty hard to erase and make them lighter without messing up the work you already did. Another thing that helps me get my shading as smooth as possible is to shade in an area with pencil and use the smudger to blend it out once. Then look at what areas should be darker and then use a darker shade pencil to go over them again. Then go in again with the smudger to smooth everything out. This way you're building up the darkness and the depth and you're blending it out each time. It really smooths it out so much more than if you were to just do it once. It gets rid of any of the whiteness that shows through the paper so that it's really just full-on grayscale and that the paper isn't showing through either. So the more times you build up on an area and blend it out, the smoother it'll be. Just know when to call it quits so it doesn't get too dark. Okay, now let's talk about values. So values are the scale of light gray to black, and you're going to want to make sure that your values are spot on. So compare your reference photo to the photo you're drawing, make sure, is this value light gray, is it medium gray, dark gray, or pitch black? The pitch black should be as black as possible because this is what's going to really make the light gray areas pop off and give it a good contrast. And the other way around too. So the light grays should be really light gray and they shouldn't be too dark, because that's what's going to make the black look really contrasted. The values go hand in hand together, and you need to pay close attention to make sure that they're perfect. Now for the eyes. So the eyes are basically just a whole bunch of shapes. It's basically a few ovals inside of each other, and then some circles inside of that. So just try to look at it in terms of shapes, and don't freak yourself out too much thinking, oh man, it's an eyeball and that has to be perfect. Just go in, build up the shapes, build up the darkest parts first, go in and smooth it out. In general, you're always going to have kind of a shadow coming on the top of the eyeball, right below the eyelid, because there's going to be, well, I mean, I guess it depends on the lighting, but there's going to be the eyelid casting a shadow down onto the eyeball. This is one thing that makes eyes look much more realistic. And then also on the bottom line of the eyelid, you're going to want to put just the tiniest little shadow, just to make the eyeball look a little curved and less flat. So going from the bottom eyelid up into the whites of the eyeballs, just giving it that little bit of dimension. And then the same thing going below the eye, kind of where when you're tired, those little pockets of where you're tired are, the circles under your eyes, the bags, those are also important for eyes.